This
Thanks,
conference will
Natalie.
now be recorded.
Wonderful, thank you. So my name's Mike Green. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on account-based marketing, everything that key account managers needed to know but were afraid to ask. The good news is that I'm not afraid to ask, so I will be asking the questions today. And let me just step through. Hang on, just 1 second. Just doesn't seem to be allowing me to step through the slides. Oh, there we go. Okay, so just to introduce myself, my name is Mike Green. I'm Deputy Chair of the Association for Key Account Management, but my day job is working for Capita as Director of Account Management in our People Solutions division. And I'm joined today by Kate Owen. I'll ask Kate to introduce herself in a second. Kate and I are sort of reversing roles on this session. We previously spoke at a conference, a B2B marketing conference back in November, where Kate was asking me questions about key account management. So I get to get my own back on her today, which is great, and I'm much looking forward to that. So Kate, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, so thanks, Mike, and thanks to everyone for having me on this webinar. So I currently look after the industry marketing and ABM across all of Capita. I've worked in marketing and comms roles for around 20 plus years and worked at organisations such as Adecco, Starbucks, the NHS, Thomson Reuters, and now obviously Capita. So always cross-industry, but very much straddling both marketing and communication roles.
Fabulous. What a broad range of experience you have, Kate, and lots of different scenarios to tap into in terms of your marketing career. So getting right into it then, I guess the first question that's on my mind is you know, it's just a sort of general introduction to the topic. So what is account-based marketing? And in your opinion, how does it differ from general business-to-business marketing? And then what are the principles of effective account-based marketing?
Yeah, so for me, account-based marketing is very much what this says on the slide, right? It's about treating these individual accounts as markets in their own right. There's a couple of different programs of account-based marketing out there in the external marketplace. There's what's known as the one-to-one ABM. So this is typically where you would have deep dive research into a small number of key accounts. There would be a myriad of long-term programs that are designed to essentially strengthen the organisation's competitive position in these accounts and ultimately to open up substantial new opportunities. The one-to-one ABM program is typically a lot more labour intensive, and it's a real mix of customised marketing programs and activities. There's also what's out there currently known as one-to-few ABM. This is probably one of the newest pieces of ABM terminology for a marketeer, but it basically takes the research-based principles of a one-to-one approach and then applies them to a smaller group or clusters of priority accounts. So here at Capita, for example, our one-to-one very much focuses on our top 20 across private sector and public sector. And then our one-to-few ABM focuses on, well, what are the next tranche of 30 accounts that could potentially tip over into that top 20 at any given point, and how do we therefore use the best-in-class one-to-one ABM approach to therefore tailor that for the one-to-few. In terms of how that differs for me to traditional general B2B marketing, I think for me, generic B2B marketing is more around account targeting and personalization at scale. So in my experience, it has often been more the marketing that relies on using mass technology. It uses relevant messaging and content and activities, but much more in a broader brush approach than it would from an account-based marketing perspective. The investment per account in terms of wider B2B marketing is much lower, for example, than the ABM principles of marketing.
Great,
I think
thank you.
The only other piece that I was going to mention there is that the reason why account-based marketing is such a buzzword at the moment, and it is one of the buzzwords, is that I think there's all sorts of research out there that shows that sophisticated buyers and our customers tune out now everything but the most relevant messages and content. So there was a recent study from Forrester that said something like 64% of senior execs believe that a salesperson doesn't know enough about a buyer's business to bring value to a meeting, and that in fact only 25% of them are prepared to take a second meeting. So for me, if you think about what that means, that's 3 out of every 4 sales meetings that for the seller and for the buyer could potentially be a waste of their time. The way that account-based marketeers can help sales and key account managers in that regard is by working together in terms of making sure that that hyper-personalised approach into the customer is at the heart of everything that they do.
Right, got it. Okay, so just moving on then, good segue into the next question, which would be, how do account-based marketers best work with key account managers and key account teams?
Yep. So at Capita, and I've only been there for coming up for 5 months now, but one of the first things that I instigated within the account-based marketing team and have then worked on it with the Capita key client partners is, what's our ABM playbook that we can, as 2 teams, both sign up for? So our core principles of ABM at Capita are around collaboration, so partnering closely as a joint unit. It's around insight-led, so making sure that whatever marketing we're doing and the strategies that we come up with are grounded in client insights. It's around this personalization that I mentioned just now, and also it's about, what's the outcome? How is this outcome driven? How are we driving reputation? How are we driving our relationships with these clients, and ultimately providing growth for our business and revenue? And so our ABM playbook very much touches on how my team is there to help the key account teams drive sales and business growth. And so we kind of have a 10-step program that we use, which is, how are we positioning for opportunities and pipeline growth? And that includes the campaigns themselves. What collateral will we create? What competitor research can we use so that we can make sure that we stand out and communicate our USP? How do we build the relationships with clients? So to the point I made around the meetings, how can marketeers assist the KAM teams with stakeholder profiling? Where are the different C-suite or group or heads of interacting across social media? What content do they actually care about? There's one of the examples I best remember from working at Reuters was, we ran this massive campaign for about a year and had ploughed quite a bit of investment into social media for financial services industry. We then ran a big customer roadshow where we actually communicated to clients to say, how would you like to consume content? Which tactics and channels work best for you? And it was just fascinating to hear directly from the customer, because in financial services, a lot of the big banks don't even allow you to access the internet during the working day. So any money you're spending from a marketing perspective on LinkedIn, for example, isn't going to reach those people during the normal working hours. And so it was very much about, how do you then tailor that approach to reach the right people in the right way? There's also elements of how we enable the sales and account teams. So one of the things that I'm working on at the moment with the team is, how are we promoting our CAMs? How are we actually creating a portfolio of activity around them to raise their profile across social media, on our website, in content? They are the people going out there having meetings with the customers and really gleaming what the customer genuinely cares about. So we should be using that content in our insights as well. And then how do we differentiate? So, how are we making sure our bid support, our asset development is very much talking to the USP and essentially reporting value back to the client? One of the big things that I saw very early on in my career was that we don't often tell our customers how we are actually adding value back to them, whether that's in videos or value reports or success story infographics. There's a whole raft of materials out there for a marketeer to help a KAM in making sure that we're reporting value back to the client.
Great. I mean, just to pick up a couple of points there, Kate. When you talk about the collaboration, insight-led, personalization, and outcome, the outcome part is super critical, right? Because that's, first of all, it's important anyway that all of the marketing activities creating an outcome. But that sort of chimes with Capita's mantra of trying to create better outcomes with all our stakeholders. So it's perfectly aligned with the company strategy as well. The second point is on the profile raising activity. I'm sure it's music to the ears of all the key account folk on the call that one of the principles of ABM is to raise their profile. So that's great. But I think it's, in the Capita context, I know that some of the client partners that we've recruited on the key account program, are quite, industry heavy hitters in their own right. So it's important to get that point across and promote them as being very credible in terms of the industries in which they operate.
Absolutely. And just to pick up on that point, which I think you were touching on the authenticity, why does that matter from a marketing perspective? It's something that I feel hugely passionate about. I mean, if you think in terms of the way that the world is changing, if you think of the outputs that come out from Davos, if you think of outputs that come out in the press on a daily basis, buyers increasingly want to do business with trustworthy customers that share their values and commitments. And so it's about recognizing that there's more than just business at hand. I went to an event probably about 6 months ago where one of the stats that they shared was quite fascinating, in that they were talking around how almost 90% of buyers are willing to buy a product or service purely based on the basis of a company's policy concerning a social matter. Now, if you think that by 2025, which actually isn't that far away, 75% and maybe even more now of the world's working population are going to be millennials. And so if you think of those two stats in conjunction with each other, authenticity in how we market and how we take our message to customers has never been more important. I think that one of the biggest mistakes that I still see probably in content marketing in general is that many businesses, I think, struggle with matching the right content to the right stage of the buyer's journey. So there's content that can sometimes be over pitchy, or it can be too sales focused. And I think that can be a bit off-putting for people that aren't quite ready to buy. And so that's why I think we've seen such an increased demand and appetite for account-based marketing, because relationship building is that longer term play, and it's about how are you patient in building that relationship, but making sure that you're tailoring your value prop and your content so that it is actually valuable to the client at the end of the day.
Yeah, and the mantra that we use is it's marriage, not Tinder. So yeah, I mean, just building on a couple of points there. So you and I were at the Capita Growth Conference earlier this week in Manchester, and amongst all the usual calls to action around making the numbers for the year, which every company would have, there was a lot of messaging around Capita's corporate social responsibility agenda. And one of the points I picked up was that is just good business. Building on your point, companies will buy from companies that are seen to be responsible businesses and doing the right thing with all their stakeholders, but particularly in this world that we need to take care of a little bit more than we are doing. So I think that's worth bearing in mind in all our marketing campaigns. The other thing, building on your point around authenticity, I mean, that as we key account managers know, that is crucial in terms of relationship building, because if you are authentic and if you are authentic in your actions with the customer, that should lead to a more trusting relationship, which will lead to a longevity in that business relationship. So I think the two go hand in hand. Good. Okay.
I think I was just going to add to that actually, and just say that, I think as a marketeer, one of the things that I've always found quite interesting is that the CSR component, or the social responsibility angle, has always been seen as a side of desk piece to any marketing campaign that you would run. I think in today's day and age, it is just something that should be the underbelly of everything that you talk about, right? I mean, I think if we look at the stuff that's coming out in the press this week, for example, there's all sorts of stuff around responsible consumerism and sustainability, and every single organisation out there has a target against the UN sustainability goals. They just do. It's on everyone's website, just as the annual report and accounts are on websites. And so, how as a marketing function are we making sure that we are telling our customers where we've got shared values? It was definitely one of the reasons I joined Capita, with the purpose-led brand relaunch around, as you say, Mike, the creating better outcomes, because everyone is focused on this and everyone is targeted around it. And so it's finding the balance between talking to your customers around the products and capabilities you can offer them that align with their strategic goals, but also showing up as a true partner on how you care about the same things.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. Okay, so let's move on. Next question is just moving specifically now to key account management. So what do you think key account managers need to know about account-based marketing, and what would you consider to be the examples of best practice that are out there?
Yeah, so hopefully the first thing that I'd like CAMs to know is that it works. Otherwise, me and my team aren't doing a good enough job if they're not. So I think firstly that it works. I think there's various different annual benchmark studies that have been done over the last few years since ABM has become this buzzword in marketing. And based on these benchmark surveys, there's overwhelming stats that showcase, based on feedback from salespeople and marketeers, that you achieve a greater ROI through your ABM programs than you do for the more traditional methods. I think there was a study done last year, at the end of the year actually, and nearly 50% said that they were achieving more than double the ROI when they looked at their ABM programs when stacked up to the more traditional lead gen initiatives. And then to the point around, not just the ROI element, but delivering better business outcomes. So, it's not just about the revenue piece, but the same study found that almost 70% of the ABM accounts were more likely to provide positive references and advocate for us other than other accounts. I mean, that's massive. Nearly 70% of customers that would therefore give you a case study, which are notoriously hard sometimes to write for particular industries. And I think the other key component there was around collaborative innovation. And so again, there was a stat that said something like 55% of ABM accounts had led to the development of valuable new solutions. And so for me, that's where the really exciting piece is, in how can you co-create with your customers on your marketing and what the roadmaps are of the future. And so I think that ABM can also help to demonstrate that. And then the final point on that, I suppose, is in terms of what you need to know, is that the CAMs are absolutely essential to a marketeer to provide them with insight. So if I think about my team that are tasked with creating this kind of massively personalized marketing campaign, we need your help. You are the guys that have a deep understanding of the client's issues and challenges. You know how that industry landscape is changing and what's emerging. You know what the impact of these changes are on your client, because you're the guys that are talking to them. And so taking that insight from you as a as a method to how we then shape our marketing campaigns in ABM is absolutely crucial for me. And I think it's something that often gets overlooked, that marketing functions might not necessarily sometimes look in-house to get the insights that they need to go external.
Yeah, no, it's a really important point. And I think just picking up on one point you made around the co-creation of marketing. So would you consider it to be a goal of you and your team to develop relationships with the marketing teams within the clients that you're working with?
Yep, definitely. And so my role prior to this actually was working for the NHS, looking after marketing, press and public affairs and internal comms. And actually every single person in that team, as part of their scorecard and their objectives for the year, had an element to it where they were tasked with making sure they had a certain number of reach outs to their peers, whether it be in the comms function, the marketing function, across the whole NHS estate. And not only did they have to reach out to them, but they had to bring back on a quarterly basis an example of a best-in-class piece of work that they had seen and think about how they would implement that into their marketing campaigns. So for me, yes, absolutely. I think to the final bit that you'd spoken about, best practice, you know, where I see other firms doing this really well is where they do co-create with their customers on marketing. So, you know, I know that there's firms out there that work together on charity quiz nights, which have been hugely successful for one of the firms. There are companies that run ABM programs with hackathons, so that it's a joint initiative where they are trying to solve the customers' challenges. And then I think if, you know, you look at how we are marketing to our customers as well, I think this whole ecosystem of how we work together as partners is crucial.
Yeah, and you know, you've hit upon one of my mantras in terms of key account management, that you need to influence your customer's customer to drive true value. So I think that's really important to keep in mind. So just wrapping this up then, and before we kind of open it up for questions, just the last question for me would be, bringing this all together, how would you measure the effectiveness of account-based marketing?
Yeah, so to my point, I suppose at the start, for me, it's about a blend across a mix of channels and a number of outputs through different key metrics. So I like to call it with my team the 3 R's. It's not new. It's not a term I've come up with. I'm sure many other people use it out there.
Trademark it then.
Yeah, but for me, it's just a really simple way of breaking it down into what's our objectives and goals from a revenue perspective. And so in that area, for me, it's around pipeline, the number of unweighted leads that are in the pipeline for sales, and sales feedback. So to my point as well about getting sales input, you know, what's sales perception of how the campaigns are working in bids or major renewals. So that's my first R. My second R, and I'm calling them mine, but obviously I know they're not. The second one is reputation. So for me, we're probably the bulk of the successfulness of an ABM campaign is measured, really. So this is all around, you know, how many numbers of positive media and social mentions are we getting from the named accounts that we're working with? How many touch points have we got with the target stakeholders that we've either got relationships with or we haven't got any relationship with? Who's actually reading the content? So, you know, there's lots of thought leadership reports out there. There's lots of video sound bites around industry challenges, but are they actually reading it? You know, numbers of case studies, what's the brand perception? And then the final piece is very much around that relationships. So what's the relationship strength, and how are marketing making sure that they're supporting sales in moving the dial on what that relationship strength is? And for me, it's about acting upon the insight across all of that. So there's no point measuring metrics or recording KPIs if you're not actually going to do anything with it. And so I'm a massive believer that you collate this data, you capture what's working, you capture what's not, and you do more of what's working and you do less of what's not. And so I'm definitely an ambassador for how you constantly refine your programs. And I think having a set of metrics that are mixed across these 3 R's enables you to do that in a more effective way. And I suppose to wrap up for me on the measuring impact bit, the point here is that similar to the fact that ABM is about having a blend of campaigns that are tailored to the customer, the data needs to be as well, right? Otherwise, we don't actually have a true reflection of how marketing is performing and ultimately whether the customers are finding it valuable and we're adding impact and creating a better outcome for them.
Yeah,
it's about them at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And you know, again, this week up in Manchester, there was a lot of talk about the use of data and analytics in Capita to drive our behaviour. And I think, you know, moving that, you know, gaining the insight from the clients, but really turning that insight into action through data and analytics is a really crucial model going forward for all companies. So thanks for that, Kate. Really appreciate your insights. Fascinating stuff. I think just as we move into questions, I mean, if we do have a little bit of time for questions, if not, I'll just ask you some more. Just for people to bear in mind, a couple of upcoming events that if you haven't heard enough about ABM, there's more to come. So we're off to Berlin in March, hosted by Pfizer. So that's going to be a great event. We've got 2 events actually. On the 3rd of March, we've got a technical workshop run by Dr. Olivier Rivière from AKAM. And Olivier is going to be talking about technology in KAM, but we'll be touching upon ABM in that session, I know. And then the following day, we have our annual conference in Berlin. And there, amongst the speaker lineup, will be Andrea Clackworthy from Fujitsu, who again is going to be talking about how she thinks about account-based marketing. So just a bit of an advert for our conference and KAM technical sessions coming up in Berlin in early March. So if you want to, you're interested to know more, visit our website, a4kam.org, and register for those sessions over in Berlin. So, Natalie, do we have any questions come through from our audience?
We did indeed. So we have our first question from Lim, who says, greetings from Malaysia. May I know how KAM ABM complements to existing brand marketing if you're not competing?
Yeah. So for me, it's about leveraging the brand, right? So if I think of what we're doing at Capita at the moment, we relaunched our brand towards the back end of last year. And so accompanying that was a whole host of various thought leadership angles. So, for example, we're currently working on the future of learning and the future of work. And so for me, it's about how do me and my team leverage the great work that the brand team do. And so there'll be the higher level of how we are repositioning Capita as a brand at the top level, but how do we then tailor that for our customers on an account by account basis? So for example, if I look at one of our accounts in financial services, what does that actually mean for them? And how do I use some of the content from the future of learning or future of work to slightly tailor it, to nuance it, and to talk to our financial services customers about it in a way that they care about, versus what a customer in retail would want to listen to, because it's very different things. So I don't think they work against each other. In a successful ABM campaign, they work to complement and enhance each other.
Thanks, Kate.
We do have another question as well. Thank you very much, Kate, saying KAM ABM is account-based, whereas brand marketers are based on overall markets. How do you strike a balance between the two?
So again, I think it's about how you straddle both of them and then tailor them, right? So it goes back to that original piece of hyper-personalisation and being authentic. So I think, you know, if you think of the wider brand teams and what they care about, they're looking at that, you know, very top of funnel, how you're changing brand perception, the reputation. And then from an ABM perspective, you're thinking about the customer. For me, what I think sometimes isn't leveraged enough is actually how you also bring the communications element into these campaigns. So having worked and led teams that are both marketing and comms, my opinion has been that the most successful campaigns that you get, whether they're ABM, brand, wider lead gen, renewal, whatever it might be, for me, the most successful ABM campaigns come from when all of the team work together to bring their expertise to the table across the full mix of marketing and comms.
Fantastic, thank you. We do have another question that says, do you know the name of the Forrester study?
I do. I can send that to you, Natalie, after, if that's helpful. And yeah, if anyone else wants to know of any of the other studies that are out there, there's some great organisations. I probably shouldn't plug one over the other, otherwise I might get into trouble. But I would suggest that there's a plethora of materials on account-based marketing that if you pop into Google, I'm sure you'll get the top ones that come up. But if anyone wants to reach out to me directly, happy to share my details, and I can share any of that info as well.
Fantastic, thank you. We do have another one as well that says, would you be able to talk through a successful ABM campaign that you have implemented?
Yep, so as part of this ABM playbook that I mentioned that I've just implemented at Capita, part of that is, I mean, obviously you need to tailor your campaign and your program to the client, but what we've actually done is say, you know, what does a typical campaign plan, a successful plan, look like? And so part of that is around how do you stage that across any given 12-month period. So, you know, where's your customized piece of thought leadership? Where's your workshop, this co-creation with the client around, you know, what content do they actually want to see? What's working? Where's your webinars that aren't just webinars that, you know, are very much high in the clouds around themes that are impacting industry, but how do you tailor a webinar for that customer, aligned to that theme, but is aligned to the customer's strategic goals? And so what we tend to do is do a lot of work on, we know, what are the top 5 things that one of our customer in telco cares about, and if the overarching theme that brand or the marketplace are talking about is the future of work, how do you then slightly nuance that in terms of speakers, or tailor it so that that particular industry or client attending it feels like they're getting a bespoke, personalized treatment? How is your social media always on? So how is your digital actually looking at these customers and targeting them? So I've got a flight plan of what we tend to do, but I think the most successful campaigns I see is where it's a mix of content, a mix of channels, but ultimately are the channels and content that the customer wants to see and it adds value to them.
Fantastic, thank you so much for that. We do are you okay to do another couple of questions?
Yeah, sure, sure.
We've had another one come in that says, is there a specific partner that you'd recommend in helping a company set up to start using ABM marketing?
So that's a really good question. What I would say to that is, you know, ABM is such a massive buzzword out there now. I think that just the sheer number of agencies and partners that will say they can help you is just huge. So whoever's asking that question, I feel your pain, because it's definitely something that me and my team are constantly reviewing, because there's so many different providers out there. Again, I probably wouldn't want to recommend one over the other. We work with a variety of different people. I suppose what I would say to that is, I'm not really an advocate of working with just one company. I actually think working with a mix of different agencies and partners brings different insights and creativity to your campaigns. So I think it's about, for you, finding an agency or a partner that understands the goals of your organisation and what you want to do with your ABM and how quickly you want to ramp it up, but then also to have a couple of other partners that you would work with so that you get a mix of service.
Thank you so much. I think that's the end of the questions at the moment, so thank you.
Great, thanks, Natalie. So, I mean, just to wrap up, I really want to thank Kate for her time. She's very busy, hugely appreciative of the effort she's put in to prepare for this and deliver a great webinar, I think. So thanks very much for that, Kate. And, you know, just hugely impressed by the work that you're putting together at Capita in terms of the account-based marketing program. I'm sure it's going to deliver great things. And best
no pressure.
I'll be watching with interest. So if there's no more questions, Natalie, we'll call it a day. But thanks everyone for joining us today. Hopefully you found it of value, and I'll see you all soon. Thanks.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye.
This conference will now be recorded.